Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for that introduction. And my name is Michael Botticelli, and I'm really happy to be here today. You know, as Anne talked in the introduction, our response to this epidemic and substance use issues in general has to be comprehensive. And prevention obviously needs to be a linchpin of our response to this. But the other issue is that this is really an all hands on deck issue, that this is a huge problem and we all have a role to play. And so I think the panel that we have here today is really emblematic of both of those principles of how we make sure we have a comprehensive response and how do we make sure that all of us are doing our best to end this epidemic and prevent substance use disorders from happening. So with that, I have the opportunity to introduce a panel of people, many of whom I've worked with for a very long time and have the utmost respect to. And to my right is Attorney General Maura Healey, who took office in 2015. She was an incredible partner to us at the federal level, not just about what happened here in Massachusetts, but really spurring other attorneys general to make sure that their states had comprehensive responses to this, and has obviously made fighting this epidemic a top priority. And you know, she's really, I think, indicative of what it means to have a comprehensive response, making naloxone available to every first responder in Massachusetts, dismantling drug trafficking operations, establishing a fentanyl strike force, and entering into landmark decisions and settlements against CVS and Walgreens over their opioid dispensing practices. And she took that money and put it toward prevention education grants, which she'll tell you more about, out of which this project was born. And to her right is a longtime champion and advocate for this issue, Chris Herren. Many of you know he's a former professional basketball player, originally from Fall River, Massachusetts. And Chris played for the, who was that, the Boston Celtics, and for several leagues overseas. And like many of us who've been impacted by addiction, it ruined his career. But Chris has been in recovery since August 1st, 2008, and has used his voice and his prominence to establish the Herren Project in 2011 to really increase public education and public awareness on substance use issues. So Chris, it's good to see you. To his right is Paul Krasinski, again, emblematic that this is an all hands on deck response. And he's CEO of a company called Epicenter Experience, which operates out of a 45-foot long former tour bus based here in the Seaport. So, you know, indicative of good startups that will start anywhere. So really, this helps clients using mobile apps to survey their consumers and measure experiences. And Epicenter will be converting that technology as part of this exciting project. And so there's more to come on that. And to his right is Andrew McCall, who is a person in recovery, found his recovery at Ostagai High School right here in Boston, and is, like many people in recovery, has continued to give back, and he's now a recovery specialist at one of our adolescent treatment programs here in Massachusetts. So like many people in recovery, that's great. You know, has returned to be a productive citizen and is hardworking and dedicated. We're really glad that he's here today. So I was also provided with another fun fact about our panelists today, myself excluded from that part, is that they all are prominent in their basketball histories. So our Attorney General Healey, professionally overseas. Chris, we talked about. Paul has quite an august history, and Andrew as well, who is now actually a coach. So we share a lot of great experiences, not only for this issue, but basketball. So we'll figure out how we do a better job of integrating sport as part of people's recovery experience, right? So good. So I'm gonna, the first question I'll give to Attorney General Healey. So Anne told us a little bit about this project, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about this project and what it means and your partnership in it.
Sure. Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you for all that you have done over the years on this and so many other issues. This is about teamwork. I think it sort of makes sense that we all played team sports. This is what we're about. This is how we're actually going to get things done, especially on this issue. And I just want to thank our partners. The Attorney General's Office was really proud to work with GE Foundation on this initiative, the Herren Project, and Epicenter Experience. It's that kind of partnership, it's that kind of collaboration, it's that kind of approach that makes this, I think, the first of its kind in the country. I am really excited to be here today. I look out and I see faces that I have spent time with over the last 2-3 years. I see my friend Corey Palazzi from Taunton. I sat with Corey and his mom, Lori, just after I took office. Corey's a young man who was given prescription pills as a result of a sports injury. He's a great baseball player. and ended up succumbing to addiction. And Corey's story is all too familiar when it comes to the stories that we've heard from so many folks as I travel across this state. We are here today because of people like Corey, and because we want to make sure that every middle school child in our state has the best shot, has the best opportunity for a healthy and successful life. That's what this is about, and it's about saving lives. So let me tell you what Project Here is all about. It's got 3 components, really excited. Every middle school in the state, all 329 middle schools in the state will this fall have the following: an educational toolkit in their hands that will enable them to reach students and talk to students about substance use and substance use prevention. Second thing we're going to provide is something that's really cool that Chris is going to talk more about, but access to social workers and those who work in recovery, particularly who can work with our young people. The third thing we're going to provide is a mobile app, and that's what Paul is bringing to the table here, a mobile app that will allow families and young people and teachers and coaches and others to directly engage with the topic of substance use disorder. This is about prevention. It's about education as well, and we know that to meet people where they are, we need to be able to do this through a digital delivery. And so those are the 3 components. It's pretty simple, but based on my experience, what I have seen and what I have learned from so many of you over the last 2.5, 3 years as this crisis has unfolded in our state, this is where we need to be. We need to continue to focus on treatment and access to recovery and support. We're going to continue to do our work in the Attorney General's office across a number of fronts. But the best way to stop addiction is to stop it before it starts. That's what today's effort is about. That's what Project Here is about. And I'm just really so excited to have the best teammates in the world to get this going.
That's great. So maybe just to follow up on that, how did this specific project come to be, and kind of how did you kind of come together in the spirit of teamwork to pull this off?
Sure, I guess you're both looking at me. So first off, thank you for GE for hosting us, and the Attorney General and Chris for first agreeing to sit on an informal panel that we hosted last fall, where we had heard a lot about the opioid crisis, not just here in the state of Massachusetts, but across the country. So we thought it was good to connect with Attorney General Healey and a close friend and teammate, Chris Herren, from way back. And yes, he did beat us by about 40 points in Fall River, but we're not keeping score. And we really spoke about it. At that point, we had David Barish and Jennifer Edwards in the front row, and as I'm wont to do at times, we put out the challenge, and it was a challenge to say, this is a problem we can address, this is a people problem that we can really find innovative solutions for. Can we reconvene? And then really from there, the process unfolded to the partnership, both public and private, which I think is a really important piece to solving these problems, is not just the public, not just the private, but really that partnership and collaboration.
And I'll just add that recently you referenced a couple of settlements from our office, and whenever we recover money like that, we want to make sure we're targeting it and putting it back to the best possible uses. And so one of the things that we did was we offered to schools around the state the opportunity to apply for grants from our office to pump into prevention and education. You know, we had $700,000 to use, and we got over $4 million of requests. The need is great. This state has mandated that we talk to kids about substance use and drugs, but we have not comprehensively enough funded that or provided the resources to actually make that happen. That changes today with this project.
Good. Chris. Chris, you've been a tremendous advocate for years, and if you haven't heard Chris speak, I really encourage you to do so. He's every time I hear him, he has this level of authenticity and genuineness that can help but touch your heart in this. But you've also traveled the country, you've seen this. So put this project in the context of kind of what you see as a response to not only this epidemic, but substance use issues.
You know, when I first started this mission 6 years ago,
Good pass.
When I first started this project 6 years ago, you know, the mission was to get out in front of people who were struggling with drugs and alcohol. And over time, I found myself in front of kids between the ages of 12 and 18. And as I presented my story to these kids, I would receive emails from kids thanking me for sharing my story. And as a public speaker, as an adult who's given that opportunity, I realized I had to shift, pivot, and get them to tell theirs. And I think when it came to our kids, we put so much focus on the worst day of drugs and alcohol, and we forget the first day. We want to show them pictures of drug addicts and have me come in and say, look at all I've given up. Look at all that I've lost, instead of talking about the beginning. And I think the beginning is what kids can understand and relate to. So through that, they started emailing me their story. And the Herren Project was not set up for that, and I felt guilty, so we hired clinicians, social workers, to receive all these emails from children so we could adjust and properly place them or guide them or assist the school with what they're struggling with. And I am so proud to be a part of this. You know, I really am. It's a dream come true for me. I will always be an advocate for treatment, but my heart, my purpose, and my passion is with the kids in prevention. So.
Paul, you bring some really interesting expertise to the table, and those of us who've been doing this work for a while, I think, have realized that it's not just about what our prevention messages are, but how do we get them to the kids that need to hear them. So maybe you could talk about a little bit about the digital platform and kind of what you hope to accomplish with that.
Yeah, I think as Attorney General Healey said, it's really about the simple things that work. When we thought about our company, we said, when people connect with people, life's just simpler. So we took that model and looked at, thinking about our kids and your kids and being able to say, how do those children function in a state and in a country where, yes, they're in school for a good portion of the day, but what happens after the school bell rings and the sports and the locker rooms you leave? Well, that's where the, blue ocean strategy is for, and the temptation is. So what we essentially said was, we know that Massachusetts has an incredibly unparalleled education system. If we can be able to extend that education beyond the four walls of the schools and really engage children and middle schoolers where they operate, right? We know that social media, we know Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook are the Bible, right? So in order to truly reach, it has to go beyond the education and actually address the problem when they have questions. One of the interesting things that I read, and if you listen to the children, they will tell you, is we are broadcasting all the time. So the ability to have a program in their hand through their mobile device that gives them access to content, gives them access to articles, reference materials, and the ability just to answer simple questions of, I'm at a party, I'm at a baseball field, I have this problem, I have this issue, I want to address it. How do we react? So being able to connect people with people. So these students all will have a universal platform that is delivered through mobile device, which will proliferate content and also give them the ability to connect with people like Chris's staff and with people like Andrew, who have credibility in the community, have gone through many of the same issues that they have. So for us, it was very simple. One, we've had family members that have struggled with substance abuse and was helped by Chris. I think Chris said really an interesting thing when we last sat down, which was wellness. Start early. You gotta start talking about it. But these kids are so desperate to tell their story that they'll stand up in the auditorium and say the problems that they have. But now what we want to offer them is a safe place that provides them with access to make the right and well-informed decisions and to get the help that they or their families need.
Good. Andrew, I want to bring you in here. So first of all, thank you for your willingness to be open about your own recovery. I think if we're going to make strides around the stigma of addiction that we those of us who've been through this, I think, have to show people that there's hope and help on the other side of addiction. So thank you for your courage in coming forward to do that.
Thank you.
So why don't you share a little bit about your own story and think about how this project might have changed your trajectory in terms of your substance use issue.
I want to thank you all for inviting me here, GE Foundation. So I grew up in a small town, Attleboro, where addiction wasn't big. I grew up in a nice house, went to a nice school, had friends, normal life. And at like the snap of a finger, I was living in the projects, hanging around bad crew, and drugs were introduced very early in my life. It was a way to escape. It was a way to let go of all my problems. And all of my friends were doing it, so I said, why not? I had problems that I didn't want to share with anybody, and if I take this drug, it takes all those problems away. So my first time in detox was at a very, very young age. And I ended up being a IV heroin user by the age of 14. So if this project was around when I was in school, where I would go to a counselor and say, look, like I have, dad problems or family problems, and there was not enough time for that one counselor to focus on me and the 1,500 other students that were in my school. Because everybody has problems, and yeah, I went to drugs to solve mine, but I would say if there was more counselors, if there was an app that I could text and say, I need help, that would save so many lives. It's crazy. So by the end of my using, I was 16 years old. I was homeless in the Boston Commons, crying because I didn't want to get high. Crying. I was screaming because I didn't want to go and meet up with the drug dealer, but I had to. So I ended up back in detox, actually the detox that I now work at. So I went to a further treatment program, which is huge, a residential further treatment program, and I linked up with Osteguy Recovery High School, and Osteguy Recovery High School saved my life, no doubt about it. They had the time, yeah, for sure. They could take the time to focus on my needs, to sit there and talk to me for 2.5 hours if I needed to talk for 2.5 hours. They invested in you. And I think that if every school in Massachusetts could take some more time, a little bit more time, to invest in a student that is struggling with addiction, it will make so much more of a difference. Like Chris Herren said, it's all about, nobody talks about like where your drug use started that first day. It's always about what happened on your last day. Your last day using was this. So if we start to focus on more of that first day and even a little bit before then, trying to solve those problems, because I didn't just stick a needle in my arm because I thought it was, fun. Like I didn't grow up to be an aspiring heroin addict. I wanted to grow up and be a professional basketball player, or like an astronaut, whatever. But
Or Attorney General.
Or Attorney General, yeah. It wasn't like that's what I wanted to be. But there was a reason why I put those drugs into my body, because I was afraid. It was all based on fear. I lived my whole life on fear. I was afraid to sit down and talk with another human being about what I was going through. Because I didn't think they understood, because they went to college and they have a great life. If somebody opened up and said, I was there 10 years ago, I would have maybe shared something about myself. So I think this project is gonna, I think it's gonna save a lot of lives before the drug use even comes into play. So I want to thank you again, everybody coming out. This is awesome. So thank you for making me a part of this.
Andrew, thank you for putting it in real human perspective for us and why this project is so important. And just to wrap up, I want to thank all of our panelists and partners, GE, the Attorney General's Office, the Herren Project, Epicenter Experience, because this really is what it's about. It's about partnership, it's about teamwork, it's about all of us pulling together and making contributions to this issue and really focusing on upstream prevention. We know that that's really the long-term solution to our problems. And we really need to make sure that we're investing in our youth as it relates to this. So thank you all for all of your contributions and for your ongoing commitment to this issue. Thanks.
At this time, we'd be happy to open it up for some questions, if there are any. Yes?
I don't have a question, I just want to make a statement. As a mom of a child who suffered through addiction after a sports injury and subsequently suffered a brain injury, I can't thank you enough for all that you're doing. And kind of like what Chris said, treatment's huge, but prevention and education is where my heart is. We have a nonprofit called Corey's Cause, and we go out and we speak at schools, middle school and high school kids, and I'm gonna get emotional, but I'm so excited about this, and it's really near and dear to my heart, and I wanna thank you all.
Thank you. And thank you, Lori and Corey, for being out there with your story. I know it's helped a lot with removing some of the stigma, which is something we continue to work on in the state. But we're here because we totally get it, that prevention is where so much of the focus and energy needs to be directed. And that's not to say there aren't wonderful prevention efforts underway. I look at partners at the Department of Public Health, our district attorneys, our YMCAs, the Boys and Girls Club. There are so many organizations that are out there doing this and supporting this. Today is about doubling down, though, and making an investment in a comprehensive, across-the-board way so that we can reach today's 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So again, thank you for being out there on the front lines, and we're just delighted to be able to amp this up to this level and spread it across the state.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Corey. You look great. Yeah.
I know.
Hi, my name is Jean Flynn, and I unfortunately lost my son at the age of 26 2 years ago to this epidemic. And I just really want to mirror what you had to say, because this has been on my mind for quite a while. Not that I've given up on people recovering. We've got some beautiful examples right here, but I lived through my son's struggle, and it was so very difficult. I've begun to really believe that prevention is really where it is. So I really want to thank you. I think this is a wonderful thing.
Thank you, Jean. And Brian's story is no different from so many stories we know, and that's what this is about. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Marianne Frangulis with MORE, Massachusetts Organization for Addiction Recovery and Person in Long-Term Recovery, and I'm excited about all of this. I'm wondering, how will it be rolled out? What's the training process and the next steps?
Well, I'll start, and then my teammates can add. But basically, here's how it's going to work. I mentioned there are 3 components to this project. The first thing is an educational toolkit, which we are in the process of preparing. We are so lucky to have the guidance and the input of Chris Herren on this. As you know, Chris has been all over the state, all over the country, reaching young people in a really profound way. And he talks about this holistically in terms of health and wellness and what actually is baked into that and what is necessary towards that. So we are working on that educational toolkit now that will be available to all 329 middle schools in this state. Separately, we're going to create some more developed material that, in terms of lesson plans and the like, that can be utilized by teachers and educators and others in schools. That's something that we're working on right now. The second component is what Chris talked about with the wonderful folks that he's got working with him through the Project Purple initiative, and the ability to have people to reach out to in a moment of need, or as students come forward and identify the very real issues that they themselves or their families are confronting with, living with, when it comes to substance use disorders and addiction. So having that live human touch and person component. And then the third thing is the app, which is underway in development. Bottom line though, this is going to be ready for release for school time in the fall. That is my goal. That is essentially the mandate. Let's get it ready. Let's be ready to roll come September. I do not want to start school without this in the hands of every middle school kid in this state. Thank you.
I would just like to add one quick thing to that. As far as the mobile app and mobile experience perspective, we actually will be working with key stakeholders and families and students to help us design what that experience should be. You know, you really don't want to guess. What you want to know is, hey, here are how modes of communication work with students, middle school students, but really employing their participation, the family's participation, and really helping us understand what content, what messages, and what we've kind of teamed up to say is that we'll be connected throughout so that anyone accessing the app will also have the private ability to engage resources through Chris's Herren project and get really the help and support like Andrew offers on a daily basis that have credibility, and when their response is out there, it actually means something. So really just see technology as only an enabler to start that dialogue and really engage participation across the state and hopefully across the country.
And we are, to that end, establishing an advisory council. And we expect any number of you to participate because we really do need everybody at the table on this. And there are so many organizations and entities and folks in the legislature and from the administration, Mayor Walsh's team, you know, everybody working in the recovery community. I'm delighted we've got folks representing school superintendents and school committees here today, as well as the PTAs. We're going to set up an advisory council so that we can regularly convene and talk about this as we both plan and launch it and roll it out, but more importantly, so that we have that in place in a sustained way going forward. And I expect any number of you to help us out, including Michael, who we are sad to lose on the national level, but grateful that he is back here in the state and is going to help us with that effort.
I think I'm next. I'm Jason Lewis. I'm the state senator. I chair the Public Health Committee, and I'm also the parent of two teenage girls, an 8th grader and a senior. And it's just wonderful to be here this morning. Incredible group of people. I echo the sentiment of the Attorney General about Michael being back in Massachusetts. You're ours. We want to take advantage of your great experience in this area. I want to applaud everyone involved in this initiative. This is a tremendous initiative. It's exactly what we need to be focused on, and I'm very excited that you all are doing this. And I just wanted to highlight something you've been saying, which is so spot on, that we talk about the last day, but we don't talk about the first day. And just one example, I had, my daughter had a graduation party this weekend, and you know, a lot of friends were over, and these are, you know, Winchester High School students. These are bright kids, and one kid comes up to me. He's a junior. He seemed to know that I'd been involved in discussions about marijuana in our state, so he said to me, "You know, I really mean this in a serious way. It's like, is marijuana really something I shouldn't be, you know, smoking at my age?" I mean, honestly, was seeking information. Didn't really understand, you know, what the impact is consuming marijuana when you're a teenager. So I did the best I could to try to answer him. I asked my daughter later. She said, "Well, he didn't totally buy what you said, but, you know, maybe you helped a little bit." But the point is that, and this is even more true with middle schoolers, right? And Chris, I've heard you speak before. It's incredible. But, you know, it's so hard, it's so important, and it's so hard to get through to them. And there's so much that they don't understand, and of course they don't have a good sense of risks and all that. So it does take a team effort. I want to encourage the group, and I was pleased to hear the Attorney General mention an advisory council. You know, it's so important to link in, you know, with the Department of Education, with our local school committees, with the substance abuse treatment and recovery community, with the Department of Public Health, because part of the challenge is we have a lot of different initiatives that are underway that don't always connect with each other. And One of the big challenges we also have is in many of our schools, we're so focused on science and math and reading, which is understandable, that we're squeezing out time for health and wellness. And a lot of this, as you pointed out, connects back to the basics, right? Health, wellness, mental health, and early education around alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, because no one starts with prescription drugs or injecting heroin, right? You start with other things. So there's a bigger conversation about, I think, how do we carve out that space in our schools and in our communities, make this the priority it needs to be, so we have the time to have these conversations with our kids, for our teachers and and other providers, and the resources to do it. This is a great step in that direction, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
I will say this as well. Some start with just sadness, not a substance, just sadness. And these kids don't have a place to communicate that sadness and work through it. And I often say, I'll retire from doing this, and I do this 250 times a year. I'll retire from this once wellness becomes a core class in our school system. We've been so focused on math and science and history and English, and yet we haven't included wellness as a core class in their curriculum. And hopefully one day that will be the case, because as Paul mentioned earlier, I spoke in West Virginia a couple of weeks ago, and when you see an 8th grade girl stand up and she said, "Mr. Herren, I'm so happy for you, but this assembly made me sad." And I said, "Why did it make you sad?" And she said, "My mom and dad left me and my little brother at home to go get groceries, and they both overdosed in the supermarket parking lot. The police saved my mom, my dad passed away. My mom called me from the hospital and said, 'Take care of your little brother, I love you, I'm coming home.' She said that phone call happened in 2011. My mom never came home. She lost both her parents on a trip to a grocery store. That little girl shouldn't have to say that out loud in front of her whole school. But unfortunately, that's the only place for her to share that and say that. And they need opportunity to get well. They deserve that. And it's not the kid who's introduced to marijuana early. It could be the 13-year-old girl who's battling a razor blade and cutting herself every single night. It could be the young girl or the young boy who pulls his hair and is struggling with eating disorders. There's so many things around this. I think sometimes we get caught up, like I said, on the worst day and not the first day, but drugs and alcohol. It's wellness, it's health, and some start with sadness, some start with substance, and some just start, and we need to give them that platform. So I think collectively as a group, we're going to provide that for children in this state, and I'm extremely thankful to be part of it.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for an amazing panel. Michael, for his leadership in monitoring. The Attorney General has been a tremendous leader in this space. You heard it today. Thank you for everything you've done. Chris, leading. Paul, helping. What a great partner. And Andrew, for sharing such a powerful story. I don't think there's anybody here. I mean, we're preaching to the choir here. Everybody in this room knows how critical this is. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting it. This is a transformational initiative. It's going to make a difference in Massachusetts. It's going to make a difference across the country. Thank you.